What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Today's episode of the podcast is our preview for the NFC South Division for the upcoming NFL season. Matt and I have dropped 4 division previews so far, the AFC and NFC North and the AFC and NFC East. So if you missed any of those, go back on this feed. Fouled Out is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can go check out all of those divisional previews. Matt and I are dropping episodes every Tuesday and Friday until we have previewed all 8 divisions in the NFL leading up to the NFL season. Then we're going to go into our week 1 podcast where we will give you our remaining wild card picks, award picks, and all that good stuff. As a reminder, you can reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. We really appreciate you guys listening, and we would love to hear from you. As part of our divisional previews, Matt and I are giving bold predictions and hot takes for every division in the NFL, and we would love to hear yours. Make sure to send those in, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. But for now, let's grab Matt and let's talk about the NFC South. Let's go. All right, Matt is here, ready to preview the NFC South Division, a division that created a lot of memes on this podcast last year, because one of us was all in on the Atlanta Falcons, and they proceeded to do what the Falcons do to their fans and to their franchise as a whole.
I was pretty in, and then you pulled me more in on the pod. This division hurt us tremendously last year.
It was funny because last year I pulled you more into being on the Falcons and got you to raise your win range. And then you returned the favor on the NFC West pod with Seattle. So I was like, this year, again, I've said this on almost every podcast so far. This is a year of conviction and sticking to what I believe. And unfortunately, I might believe in the Falcons again. So someone needs to just put me out of my misery before the NFL season starts. But that said, why don't we jump into our biggest narratives for the NFC South? And it is a NFC podcast, so you get to lead off.
Yeah, I guess we're going to bury the lead there. But
unless you want me to go first, since this is my division.
I'll go. Can Canales save Bryce Young? I think anyone who watched Bryce Young at any point during his college career knows that he is a better player than what we saw last year. And if you watched the Panthers last year, there wasn't a whole lot of hope there anyways. So somewhat understandable. But it's kind of put up or shut up time now. If you don't show something of some promise through your first 2 years in the NFL, it is highly unlikely that you will amount to anything in the NFL. That is something that Vikings fans will be rudely aware of this year, watching Sam Darnold for 17 games this year. Geno Smith is the exception to the rule. I don't think anyone's pushing him into a top 10. So it's kind of now or never for Bryce Young to at least show that there's something there to work with.
The ironic thing is that the guy they're relying on to kind of fix, and it's funny because we all want to say like he needs to fix Bryce Young's career, where this is literally year 2 for Bryce Young, who was starting from day 1 as a rookie QB on a horrible team with a horrible coach in a horrible system with horrible weapons around him. And so it's like, you got to save him. But the guy that they're relying on to get Bryce Young on the right path, I'll put it that way, is David Canales, who the last 2 years has resurrected guys who showed no promise through the first couple years of their career, where he goes to Seattle 2 years ago and completely resurrects Geno Smith in like one of the most amazing turnarounds that we've ever seen for a quarterback to be in the league that long.
Yeah, for Geno Smith, it was much more than the first couple of years of his career. He's like, what, like pushing 10 years now?
Yeah. And to go from being a career backup and a total bust to being I think he finished top 8 in the MVP 2 seasons ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then David Canales leaves there and goes to Tampa and gets Baker Mayfield last year, who, like, Baker Mayfield showed more promise than Geno Smith did through the
There
first
was a
couple of
lot
years
of
of his
people who were
career.
excited about him after his rookie year, but other than that, it's kind of really up and down.
They had that year too where they played Kansas City
Yep.
in the AFC divisional round or whatever. But like Baker Mayfield, another guy that was pretty much labeled as a bust. The Browns
Yeah.
basically let him go. He plays a little bit for the Rams and does well for a couple games and then goes to Tampa. And Canales goes to Tampa and turns Baker into a legitimately good starting quarterback last
Mm-hmm.
year. And Tampa wins their division. So Canales has worked miracles. I don't know that a miracle is what's needed here, but he would be my number one guy right now. That if I had a struggling quarterback, I'd be like, okay, who do I call to fix this? The number one call is David Canales.
Yeah.
So I thought a really smart decision by the Panthers, like not only to get him, but also to take him away from a division rival. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what Bryce Young can do in Canales' offense. I mean, I think the only question is like Canales has been an OC for a couple of years now, and now he's going into being a head coach. Is it going to have the same impact? How much does he actually work with Bryce Young? But
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're the Panthers owners and the GM and the whole front office, you're like, listen, your number one job as the head coach is to make this guy look good because we traded away Caleb Williams and DJ Moore for him, along with other
Yeah.
things. They literally traded away Caleb Williams, who might end up being one of the very best quarterbacks in the league in short order for Bryce Young. So, yeah, this is an important season for the Panthers franchise because if Bryce Young sucks after you went out and like, I'm not saying it's great shakes, but they got Xavier Legette. They drafted him in the second round. You get Thielen, you got Deontay Johnson in a trade. So you're trying to put stuff in there. And I'm not saying the Panthers even have to be like above 500 or be a great team this season, but my God, if Bryce Young looks bad again this year, it is going to be an absolute disaster for everyone associated with that franchise. All right. My biggest narrative for the NFC South this season. Will the Falcons fuck me again? The Falcons fucked me last season. I was very high on Atlanta. I was calling for double-digit wins in a division title. I think my win range was between like 10 and 12 for them last season. I was like, this is it, man. They got the pieces. I am fired up. I'm ready to go. They win 7 games. They miss the playoffs. And overall, we're probably, maybe outside of the Patriots last season, the least enjoyable team to watch in the entire NFL. Like, it was not fun. I had Bijan Robinson on my fantasy team last year, and I was like all about it the first couple of weeks. I was like, dude, this might be, he scored like 19 points week 2 in half point PPR. And I was like, this might be the least points he ever scores. He's so good. And then chode coach Arthur Smith is like, hey, here's 20 carries for Tyler Algier and 7 for Bijan Robinson. And like, they were just atrocious last season. And after the year, I swore on this podcast I would not be back in on the Falcons this season. And yet, here we are, one off season later. I'm looking at the roster. I really like what I see. You know, one of their biggest issues last year was quarterback. Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke were absolutely atrocious in chode coach Arthur Smith's system. So they got a new coach who I like in Raheem Morris. They bring in Zach Robinson as the offensive coordinator, another dude that I really like. I wanted him for New England, but as soon as Raheem Morris came over from the Rams, you kind of knew that Zach Robinson was going with him. They signed Kirk Cousins for a ton of money, which, I mean, like, not like Kirk is the best quarterback in the league, but I definitely think he's top 12 still, depending on his health, because he's another older quarterback who's coming off of a major injury. So new coaching QB, they have a top 5 offensive line in PFF's rankings right now. Last year, they were top 10 in defense in yards allowed. but 17th in points allowed. And a large part of that was because the offense put them in such horrible positions over and over and over again. They go out to in the last week, they trade for Matt Judon from the Patriots. So like one of their biggest needs was edge rusher. And they bring in a guy who is an up and down edge rusher or was an up and down edge rusher in New England, but when he's up is very up. And then they go out and they sign Justin Simmons, who was just kind of like floating around there he's just kind of floating out there for some reason. So, I mean, if you told me 2 years ago that a team had Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates as their safeties, I would just be like, that's probably the best defense in the league. But still, like, even with the lack of talent defensively, they were still pretty good on defense last year. So there's all these things where I'm like, yeah, I want to be in on the Falcons really bad. I'm really excited for the Falcons. I think that like with Kirk Cousins and Bijan Robinson and like competent coaching that they could actually take a step forward. But then they go out and they spend the 8th pick in the draft on Michael Penix after signing Kirk Cousins to a massive deal. So with all this awesome stuff going on, they're absolutely still the Falcons. And that's why I leave the door open and say, are they going to fuck me again this season or not?
It's funny that you say this is the year of conviction, and you've already abandoned one conviction.
Don't be in on the Falcons.
You've already thrown that out the window.
I know. This is my like.
That's how I know it's not a year of conviction.
This is my Brokeback Mountain pick of the year. Where I'm like, I wish I knew how to quit you, Atlanta Falcons.
Why can't I quit you?
They hated me because of 28-3 and how much we made fun of the Falcons. Like Atlanta fans were pissed at me. And then me and Atlanta fans were cool after the beginning of last season where I'm like, listen, you guys are going to be great. And then I was pissed at them. So like we were kind of even. And now this is the tiebreaker. Like Atlanta, if you fuck me on this pick again, I will never forgive you. But I mean, even outside of me, I think that's the big question because they're the division favorite. You know, they're probably they're supposed to have a home playoff game. They just spent a bunch of money on Kirk Cousins. Like, yeah, are they going to do what the Falcons do? Because they already did it in the draft. And I definitely am not sitting here on August 19th saying that the Atlanta Falcons are my good vibes team for the season. Because the stuff with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix has been really weird so far. So speaking of the Falcons and our expectations for them this season, they are up first on our win ranges.
Yeah.
So what win range do you have for the Falcons of Atlanta? 15-17.
You mentioned them not being the good vibes team. So it's a little broad for me. Because of that. We know how badly the vibes can impact a team, and just like I don't know, there's just a lot of questions about this team. Like even like bringing in Simmons, why was he out there this late in the process? Has he fallen off? I saw how quickly that happened for Glover Quinn. Like, is that why teams were not paying him? We don't know. So I have them from 6-11. I totally see how they can be double-digit wins, home playoff game, win the division, all that shit. They're also the Falcons. And I don't think I need to say more than that.
Yeah, the other weird thing with the Falcons right now is that Michael Penix played in the preseason and actually looked really good. And the Falcons are like, okay, nothing to see here. We're shutting him down for the rest of the preseason. And it's like, okay, did they see enough from him where they're like, yeah, this is our guy? Like, it's really weird. I have 8-12 for the Falcons. I really wanted to say 9-12 and just be like, yeah, listen, this is a good team. They're going to have a winning record. I like the coach. I like the coordinator. I think it's going to be good. But it is the Falcons. And so I have to leave open the possibility that they finish 8-9 and do not win this division. The over-under in Vegas is 9.5. So Vegas expects them to, be a 500 team or better. It is really my expectation. But like I said in my biggest narrative, they could just totally fuck me and be a 7 or an 8 win team. And
Yeah.
I
And
wouldn't be shocked.
that is what my win range is showing.
Yeah.
Like, as much as you may not like it, like, any outcome is within the range of possibility for the Falcons.
The true win range for the Falcons is 0 to 17.
Yeah.
That's it. All right. Team 2 in the NFC South, the other team that we talked about in biggest narratives. What is your win range for the Carolina Mad Cats?
If Dave Canales truly works his magic, the absolute most I can see them pulling off is 8 wins. I don't see them being above 500. But this is also the worst team in the league last year. And they notably didn't have a whole lot of draft picks. And they also notably don't have Brian Burns anymore. So my floor for them is 3 wins. I think they will still be better just by regression to the mean progression to the mean, I guess, in this case.
Most times we don't hear about progression to the mean, but
right,
this is definitely the case.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it is entirely possible that they are again the worst team in the league. So
yeah, we're pretty much on the same page here. I had 3 to 7.
Yeah.
Vegas has the over under at 5.5, which just when you say 5.5, that means that they have to win 6 games to go over. And it just sounds like a lot to me. But I think a lot of the teams in this division are meh this year. But for Carolina specifically, so one thing we didn't talk about in the opener is that they did invest some money bringing in free agents along the offensive line.
Yep.
They were pretty much dead last season. So even adding a couple guys takes them up to 20th in PFF's rankings. So it's like, yeah, it's better, but it's not great. And my problem, you talked about getting rid of Brian Burns, like your best player, one of the best edge rushers in the league, is now no longer on that defense. And then also they violated one of my cardinal rules of team building. And it's like, you have a lot of needs. There's a lot of needs over here. And you went ahead and picked Jonathan Brooks.
Yep.
In the second round when I just feel like we're going to go back and look at that pick and be like, God, they could have had we'll list 17 guys and be like, they could have had these guys. Not even that Jonathan Brooks can't be good, but it's a luxury pick for a team that does not have a good roster. In a lot of ways.
He needs to be like Adrian Peterson in order for it to be worth it.
Yeah.
Prime Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. So I think that they take a step forward this season purely from the point that they're going to be competent. Like we've just seen teams like that where it's like, God, this team is like when Urban Meyer coached the Jags. It was just like, this team is completely
finally
incompetent.
There's an adult in the room.
And then they bring in Peterson and it's like, yeah, Peterson's not a great coach, but at least he's a real coach.
He's less shitty.
Yeah. And I actually, so I really like Canales. I'm excited to see how he does as head coach, and I expect there to be a step forward, but even 4 wins would be a big step forward for them from where they were last season. 4 or 5 wins would still be a huge step. So
for sure. Yeah.
The next team is a team we haven't talked about yet, and that is the New Orleans Saints.
I have them from 6 to 9. I don't feel like they've upgraded their offensive line anywhere near enough. It's been a problem for a while. And while that defense can keep them in a lot of games, I don't think that that's going to be enough without improving that offensive line, because Derek Carr absolutely needs that. And I mean, when Alvin Kamara was tearing it up, he had a pretty decent offensive line. So I just don't see them doing more than breaking just above 500.
Where kind of on the same page here too. I think we've been on the same page on a lot
Yeah.
of these so far. I have the
Mhm.
Saints from 5 to 8. Vegas has them with an over under of 7.5. So the Saints are the team that I am the most meh on in the entire
Yeah.
NFL. Like,
Yep.
they're boring. I don't think there's anything fun about them.
No.
To add to their offensive line woes, like the offensive line already wasn't going to be good. And now Ryan Ramczyk is out for the season.
Yeah.
So PFF has them dead last in offensive line rankings. And I know I've already mentioned PFF's offensive line rankings like 5 times on this podcast. And people are like, oh, wow, Adam's PFF membership probably just renewed the other day, which is true. Uh, but you can look at like offensive line rankings for a lot of like good NFL writers right now, and the Saints are pretty much near the bottom, especially without Ramczyk. They're just kind of like mediocre all the time now.
Hmm.
Like they're living life post Breeze. And
Yeah.
this is the problem we see with a lot of NFL teams. My team is going through it right now, the Patriots. When you have a big time elite quarterback like that and they leave or retire, your options are basically like, we're going to bottom out and rebuild,
Hmm.
or we're going to try to compete still. And the teams that try to compete still always end up just being mediocre for years.
Yep.
And the Saints spend a ton of money to compete still. And every single year, we look at them at the beginning of the offseason and they're like 75 million over the cap. And we're like, how the hell are they going to field a team this year? And then somehow they field a team. But that team
Well,
is always mediocre.
and like maybe it could work if you took a couple of years to say like, hey, we're gonna work on the foundation of this team. We're gonna get like the offensive line solidified with younger players that we know that we can roll with for the next 5-ish years, and like actually have something to work with without needing to retool every single year just to get 11 guys on the field consistently. But they just they, they haven't even thrown in 1 year to really like rebuild that.
That's the problem, is that they instantly were like, you know what we're going to do is go spend a bunch of money on Derek Carr in free agency,
Yeah.
who is a mediocre quarterback. And they go out and just spend a ton of money on him. And they're like, screw the bill. We'll just figure it out down the road. We'll just keep kicking the can down the road and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And Derek Carr is a guy who, like, you can win with Derek Carr if the
Hmm.
rest of your roster is very good. You will not win because of Derek Carr. And they're looking at him and they're like, why are we not winning more games? We have Derek Carr and Chris Olave. And it's like, yeah, but there's other, yeah. So they just,
Well, I mean, you're never gonna win with Derek Carr if Derek Carr is always on his back. So, like,
yeah,
doesn't matter.
they're just, I'm meh. And so I put them like 5 to 8 is like the most meh win range, because it's like, yeah, you might be like close to 500, but you're not really going to be there. I kind
Yeah.
of expect them to be in that like 7 win range, like 7 and 9, and just meh.
Yep.
Last team in the division, the defending NFC South champions, who we've gone through almost the whole podcast. We haven't even mentioned them outside of their quarterback, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What do you have for the Bucks?
I have them 7 to 10, purely from the standpoint of like, hey, they won the division last year. I kind of got to give them that puncher's chance at that. But like, they're a team that basically just doubled down on what they had last year. A lot of teams in the division got better. They stayed the same. Uh, that I very easily could see them not winning as many games. But you know, it's entirely possible that something clicked for Baker Mayfield last year and he built on that. And if that's the case, sure, like maybe they're even better because that is like the most important thing. But if not, like they're probably going to be an 8 or 9 win team.
Yeah, so I was close to you. I said 6 to 9. And Vegas has them over under 7.5. I have two big problems with this team. One is like you mentioned, they basically are like bringing back the same team as last year. But the only difference is that last year they were paying Baker Mayfield like less than $5 million. And this year they're paying Baker Mayfield $30 million as part of a 3-year, $100 million deal. So they had to make cuts to other parts of their roster in order to accommodate that deal.
Yeah.
So like Devin White's in Philadelphia. Now, there's some other guys missing. So like you bring back pretty much the same team, but with less depth. And then, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, you lose David Canales, who goes to a division rival in the Panthers.
Yeah. That's the real bugaboo.
Yeah. So when Canales left Seattle, the year that Geno Smith had Canales, he threw for 4,300 yards and completed 70% of his passes and was in the MVP voting. He comes back and completes 65% of his passes for 3,600 yards. Like, not horrible, but definitely not where he was in Canales' offense. And this team got an awesome year out of Baker Mayfield last season and won 9 games. And now you're coming back with the same team. And I just do not think this team can survive any type of drop off from Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And I think there's just naturally going to be one unless their new offensive coordinator is like lights out, because Canales was.
Yeah.
So that's what worries me. So I actually expect them to be under 500, but I didn't have high expectations for this team last year. And they played well and put up a pretty good fight with the Lions in that playoff game. So I had to put 9 on there just because I underestimated them before and I got burned.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you watched them play last year, like they're a gritty team. Like, even when they're outmatched, like they're still gonna like kind of pull you down a little bit just because they're not gonna stop fighting. I mean, there's plenty of guys on that roster that won a Super Bowl and they want to win another.
There's guys on the roster who like embody that too. It's like Mike Evans, it's Antoine Winfield. Like there's a lot of pieces there I still like. It's just like I said, you were paying Baker like $3 million last year, and now you've 10 times that because you had to, and you've lost depth. So I don't know how this team puts up the same season they had last year, especially when other teams around them are getting better.
Yeah.
So, what is your bold prediction for the NFC South?
Despite some of the more critical things we have said about the teams in this division, this division combined for a total of 27 wins last year. I am going to predict that goes up to 32, which is an increase of 5, which is, I would say, significant.
Weren't they like last for divisions last year?
They had to be
like dead last.
I mean, the Mad Cats really had an impact in that.
Yeah. Tough season for the Mad Cats, especially because they didn't have their own pick. So the Mad Cats were worse when they were trying last season than teams like the Patriots were when they were trying to tank. Like the Patriots were purposely trying to lose games last season and could not get down to the level of the Mad Cats.
Yeah.
All right. My bold prediction is that the Falcons will finish top 5. They'll be a top 5 offense in yards and points this season. I think everything is there, and a lot of it's just going to depend on Kirk's health. That's why it's bold, is because he's 36 years old and coming off a torn Achilles that he suffered in week 8 last season. So, he's had less than a whole year to rehab, but he says he's ready. And I kind of talked about it with Rodgers that the recovery for that type of injury is not the same as it used to be, especially for a pocket quarterback. But part of me is like, what if Kirk gets hurt and Penix comes in and just balls, and the Falcons are like, this is why we did this. We're actually geniuses. Just because that move was so universally panned that it just feels like it has to be the right one. But I really like Zach Robinson, and I expect them to absolutely feed Bijan this year behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. Like, especially the interior of that offensive line might be the very best in the league. And I expect him to eat now that he's out of chode coach Arthur Smith's hands. Who is your division winner?
I'm going to make you go first.
You know who mine is.
I know. That's why I'm making you go first.
I picked the Falcons. I actually expect the Falcons to be over 500 and every other team in this division to be under 500 this season.
Yeah, I'm going with the Falcons as well. I just didn't want to say it first because it really just feels dirty. Like
the dirt. This is why they call them the Dirty Birds, man.
They are the Dirty Birds because you feel dirty expecting them to do anything good because you know they're going to kick you in the dick with it.
I hate it. I hate this. I hate that this is where we are again this season. I was just like, God, why couldn't one of these teams take a giant step forward? Like, it feels like the Panthers are going to take a step forward, but what does that mean trying to win a division? Probably nothing. And then, like, I feel like the Saints and the Tampa Bay are probably going to take a step back. So I don't want to be here, Atlanta, but here we are. I'm back on the bandwagon. I'm sipping the Kool-Aid. Let's go Falcons. Caw. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. If you want to email us and make fun of me for being back in on the Falcons this season, you can hit us up, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys listening, and we'd love to hear from you. And then you can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It is a long name, but you can't miss it. This podcast is coming out Tuesday, August 20th. And Matt and I will be back on Friday, August 23rd with our preview of the AFC South Division, a division that Matt and I actually talked about a lot when I saw him over the weekend. So that'll be a fun preview as well. But for now, we'll see you guys soon. So,
bye, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, Robin.
Bye, Mom.